This is my last attempt at this. Was I successful? Any audio? Good, good. Thank God, at least we're having a little bit of. And by the way, if you think I'm getting really angry right now, you are absolutely correct. Really, really pissed off. But in any event, what can I say? It's technology and technology fails. So there's a bunch of you who are able to make comments in the regular chat. Thank you very much for that. However, for the most part, I'm going to be paying attention to the Discord questions. But nevertheless, since I caused you guys so much trouble with this initial issue, I'll pay attention periodically to the stuff coming in over the live chat as well as a I'm sorry for this embarrassing screw up. So in any event, let's proceed. The topic for today, because of the voting which Patreon members were allowed to make, is the challenges for Mars colonization. So in any event, now that we have the topic open, I'd like to, and by the way, I'm seeing lots of folks saying no problem, and that you guys are way too forgiving. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And by the way, you get to see my whole face once again in all of its terrifying glory. So, all right. As far as questions are concerned, now that we're over all of this craziness, one of the things that one of my subscribers brought to my attention was an article about the presence of perchlorates in the Martian soil and a unique way that we could solve this particular issue, which I have to admit, once I read the article, I was absolutely astonished. Oh, and by the way, I'm delighted to see that people are logging on. Thank you very much for all of that. You're way too kind. Dry mouth, no surprise, right? Okay. So oh yeah, there's my live stream, by the way. That's got to look terrifying. I'll change that thumbnail when I get the chance. So the presence of perchlorates in the soil has been a big issue. Oh, somebody just asked a question though. The first question to be asked, and it came from the outside. What is my background? Well, my background, essentially, I was in the tech field for over 20 years, but that's not what gave me my information about space. My uncle was career NASA from the beginnings of the Apollo project all the way until the space shuttle. So decades and decades with NASA, and he taught me a tremendous amount about space and sparked my interest when I was just 10 years old, and I've been studying it ever since. He helped me with a lot of it until sadly he passed away. If he were alive today, he would be absolutely delighted with what he's seeing with the Artemis, and especially with SpaceX and everything they have planned. He would be absolutely delighted. Okay, so let's get back onto the topic. Somebody mentioned dust on the main chat. Glad to see that you folks are participating there as well. And yes, that does have something to do with the perchlorates. Dust is, of course, also likely to be full of perchlorates, which is likely to be extremely hazardous to the bear with me for just one moment. Okay, the answer to the question is yes. That was just asked on Discord. Yes. All right. So in any event, as far as the dust is concerned, it of course is going to be full of perchlorates, and it's going to be an extreme hazard to anybody who brings it into a habitat with them, as the Apollo astronauts did with the lunar regolith. That's going to simply present a problem. And there's going to have to be, very thorough, and I would say also a multi-step process of getting this stuff removed. However, getting it removed is not the only thing that you have to do. As was pointed out to me by the subscriber, and I read this research paper, removing the dust and the perchlorates can actually produce a lot of things that we can make use of, specifically oxygen. As a matter of fact, they actually designed a emergency system that would allow us to allow an astronaut to have an hour's worth of emergency oxygen supply just by getting a few kilograms of Martian regolith and exposing it to this device, which is essentially full of enzymes that naturally process the perchlorates and converts it into oxygen. So the perchlorates could be as much of a benefit as they could be a hazard. And they're fairly easy to remove as long as you have a lot of water to work with. And as we know, there's a very, very large amount of water on Mars. So, most of my videos have, been associated with, soil-free forms of agriculture, but it doesn't have to be that way. We can also use Martian soil to produce a variety of different sorts of things that we can't do with aquaponics or aeroponics, things like trees, apple trees, that sort of thing, groves, etc. All of that is certainly by an FTL. Yes, that is the correct Q&A channel. Okay, so just to be clear, yes, indeed. All right, so yeah, the dust can be as much of a problem as it can be, a positive. Hey there, Mr. Shaman. So, in any event, feel free to ask questions. Currently, as far as I'm concerned, ask them here or ask them on live chat since we have it open. Artificial way to restart the Martian electromagnetic field. That is something that is a long way in the future. FTL, to answer your question, we're talking about challenges to Martian colonization. That's what all of you folks voted on, the Patreon members. So challenges to Mars colonization. Generating an artificial magnetic field could be an extreme challenge. Of course, we're talking about lots of power, and we're talking, about technology that's a bit beyond our capabilities. Other suggestions have been something called Dyson dots, placed at certain points between Mars and the sun that would provide a shading effect, perhaps eliminating some of the radiation. But frankly, in my opinion, the radiation levels at the surface of Mars are not extreme enough for us to have to go to these kinds of, to take these kinds of measures. I don't think that we need to generate an artificial magnetic field. This is just my personal opinion. I think that the radiation levels at the surface of Mars are manageable. You could stand unprotected, well, spacesuit of course, but unprotected on the surface of Mars for 8 years and not inside any sort of habitat dome and stand about a 5% chance of eventually dying of cancer. And I have a lot of information to back that up on my radioactive hellhole video, which you can find a little bit further back in my collection of videos. But in any event, all right, how long before liquid lakes on Mars? I would say that that's going to be a significant amount of time. I mean, we're talking centuries. Unless we can find a way to contain a certain area of the Martian surface and isolate it from the rest of the atmosphere, that'll give us an opportunity to, not have water evaporate or freeze the way it does currently on Mars for the brief amount of time that it might be in liquid form. And that's still under debate as well as to whether or not, water does exist in a liquid state on Mars for any considerable amount of time. Does Mars have basalt? Absolutely. Mars does, because of the extreme volcanic activity on the surface, and because Mars has such an extreme volcanic past. Yes, definitely not the case. Turn my phone to not disturb. Yes, I agree. Another space nut, I would like to do that, but right now I have to admit I am terrified to even touch this thing at the moment for fear of shutting something down. So all I can say is we'll have occasional beeps, but I have to tell you that they don't come up very often on my phone. So I just don't want to risk, inconveniencing you guys more by having this problem come up again. So in any event, we'll get this rectified next time. In the meantime, let's keep it going. All right, but yes, to answer your question, FTL, Mars does have basalt. And once again, please forgive me, my eyesight fails me. I'm using my phone here, so the things that are coming in over the live chat, I have a hard time seeing. But in any event, I reveal, yes indeed. So, melting basalt to produce fiber structures like basaltic rebar. That's an interesting idea. Sure, absolutely. When it comes right down to it, the Martian crust, as far as we know, contains a great deal of the same kinds of elements that we have here. I mean, there's no reason why we can't mine for a lot of the materials that we'll need in order to construct things. But yes, as strong as carbon fiber, that's a very intriguing idea, FTL. So yeah, that's definitely something that could happen. By the way, guys, if you're still wondering, or if you're still wondering, the best way to ask questions is to go to the question and answer portion of the Patreon on Discord. And another space nut just brought up the fact that we can even make glass easily on Mars. And yes, indeed we can. So that would be other possibilities. And that's something else that I wanted to bring up. As far as there being an industry for Mars colonization, something extremely valuable to future Martian colonists, producing glass may mean that we can also produce solar panels. And if we can produce, I'm speaking of myself as a future Martian, which I hope to be, I suppose, at some point, if we can produce solar panels in large quantities on Mars, these can be shipped back by these fleets of starships that have just delivered thousands and thousands of tons of cargo. Why not bring these back to Earth, place them in orbit, and use them as what I like to call, and others like to call, Dyson dots, to transmit solar energy via microwave down to the planet's surface. This would be a massive advantage for power requirements as they continue to grow on Earth, and could be a huge, huge industry for the growing Martian economy. All right, we just had a number of other things. Terraforming, Valles Marineris, I've been thinking about that. Okay, so as far as terraforming is concerned, perhaps using the Valles Marineris in order to be able to do that. One of the drawbacks in terms of trying to isolate such a massive region of Mars to terraforming, although I love the idea, is the fact that Mars gets hit with no less than 200 meteoroid impacts per year. So any sort of anything you use to isolate a large valley from the rest of Mars is likely to receive an impact from a meteor. And as a result, unless you can come up with some systems of isolating the Valles Marineris from the rest of the planet, that I haven't thought of, this could produce an extreme threat to anybody trying to terraform the valley. Now, you could terraform a lava tube, for example, one of the lava tubes of Olympus Mons. That could also be a possibility. And a meteoroid impact, yes, that's something I've considered, but a meteoroid impact would not be as problematic if you were to terraform a lava tube. A dome over the valley with cellular self-healing dome material using pressure differential. Something that's an intriguing idea. I'll research that, and perhaps that'll be a topic for a future video. But yeah, we talk about self-healing. I mean, we have self-sealing fuel tanks right now. So yeah, if it was a relatively small meteoroid that produced a relatively small hole, and also we had the valley sectioned off into isolated areas, kind of like you have different compartments of a ship to avoid quick flooding in the event of a breach in the ship's hull. Yeah, maybe that might be a possibility. A kind of foam, as FTL brings up. Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for bringing that up. Net Shaman, you brought up triangulation. Oh, I think that was in response to FTL. I apologize. Okay, let's keep going from terraforming the Valles Marineris, and we've talked a bit about a couple of other subjects, such as the dust and the perchlorates, and ways of using the perchlorates rather than them just being a threat to us, instead of just being a threat, they could also be a positive thing. Another space nut just pointed out that Elon Musk had brought up that you'd be able to produce glass as a byproduct of creating methane. Very interesting. I'd like to look that up. So yeah, the more glass that Mars is able to produce, the better, definitely. We have 3 different people typing. Oh, tons of people typing right now. So bear with me for just one moment. How much resolving power could be had with a telescope? Wow, these are ambitious projects we're talking about, FTL, and one that I'll definitely research, but it kind of goes outside the scope of what we're talking about now. Challenges to Mars colonization, even though this could be, definitely a big advantage to colonizing Mars and another positive to doing it. Yes, massive and incredibly fast landslides. That is another drawback to the Valles Marineris. I think that a study of, in terms of the dangers that landslides might represent, a study of Martian geology, a study of the valley and areas that might be landslide prone, just like we do today when it comes to landslides is going to be an extremely important thing when we're talking about colonizing the Valles Marineris. We do know that landslides currently happen on Mars. They happen, sometimes at the poles, sometimes elsewhere. It's been theorized that some of the Mars quakes that have been detected thus far are created because of landslides. So yes, they could be an issue. There's no question about that. So yeah, that's a study of the geology, identifying the areas that might be prone to landslides. There are methods that are currently used to shore up areas that are vulnerable to landslides here on Earth. Living in a relatively mountainous area myself, I see that all the time. So these are the sorts of things that might be used in order to minimize the possibility of extreme landslides. And of course, on the other side of things, the closer you are to a cliff, the lower the radiation levels. So it's sort of a dual-edged sword, isn't it? But yes, that's something that the Curiosity rover determined, is that the closer that it came to cliff-like geological features on Mars, the more the radiation dropped off, quite radically, actually. So in any event, any atmosphere existing in any deep lava tubes, currently we have not, there's dormant ones at Olympus Mons, as another space nut pointed out. But yeah, lava tubes are definitely a possibility, although it would probably be a pretty good idea for us to determine exactly what the nature of volcanism is on Mars right now before we decide to use lava tubes as our area to dwell in. But yes, there's a strong possibility that the lava tubes beneath Olympus Mons and the other major volcanoes in that region are entirely dormant and would be relatively safe. And yes, Tom, you just pointed out that lava tubes go kilometers or kilometers deep, depending on how you prefer to pronounce that. And yes, they would be a great way to set up our first base. Although chances are, as another space nut brought up the last time, probably the best way for us to set up our initial habitation structures will be to dismantle the starships and cover them in regolith in order to give us protection against radiation. But in terms of a major base, yeah, definitely. These lava tubes are as much as 20 kilometers in length and 3 to 5 kilometers in width, and could definitely support hundreds of thousands, if not a million people, the entire population of Elon Musk's idea. So yeah, that would definitely be another possibility. Would it make to research and develop lava tube habitats on the moon first, as FTL just brought up? Yeah, doing any of this stuff on the moon first makes the most sense. Use the moon as a dress rehearsal for Mars, in my opinion, is the best way to proceed. But frankly, if we're going to put boots on Mars by 2024, that will be simply impossible. There's no way that we're going to be able to determine much of anything as far as our lunar efforts are concerned before we have boots on the moon. Now, I read boots on Mars. Now, if we put boots on Mars after 2024, then yes, we can learn from our experiences on the moon as to how best to set up a base on Mars. There's lots of similarities. Yes, the Nat Geo show. Starin just brought up a point. The Nat Geo series where they lived on Mars in a tube was hella depressing. Yes, indeed it was. And as I'm sure a lot of you know, I don't mind cursing terribly much on this channel because that's just the way I am. But in any event, yeah, I do think subsurface dwelling is depressing unless you have ways to access the surface relatively easily. Some sort of elevator to the surface that folks can access on a regular basis. But yes, the psychological impact of living subsurface for a long stretch of time with no sight of sky or sunlight is well established. It takes a substantial psychological toll on most people, not all, but most. And this is well established in our mining communities. So, in any event, bear with me for just one moment. All right, let's keep this going. We got several people typing right now. Lots of people going. Couldn't something like Spot help maintain a human? Yeah, that's an interesting idea that's been talked about extremely on one of my favorite channels. And I'll do a shout out to him right now, Jean-Michel Gaudier, who is a futurist and talks a lot about this sort of thing. If we can find a way to, transition our consciousness into a machine, or simply allow a machine to do a lot of the observing for us, that could make some sort of difference. But I would say that the personal experience of being on the surface is really what has the best psychological impact, which is why that NASA, with all of these habitation structures, all of them and all the contests that they run associated with them involve surface living. All of them do. And it's because of the psychological impact of subsurface dwelling. It cannot be overstated. And so, things like Marcia, things like the ice house, all of these things allow us to have access, a view of the Martian surface, etc. Boy, we have things coming in quickly. It's FTL. I'd say that this is underground living is a matter for debate, but I do have some articles posted in terms of the psychological impacts of living underground, and I will, if I remember, I will go ahead and repost those articles to emphasize that. To place not tubes. Could you place the Starship inside? Wow, that's an intriguing idea. Yes, if we can identify a lava tube that's big enough, there's no limit. Yes, when Neuralink allows us to transfer our mind. Wow, I'm getting a bit distracted. But yes, if we can find lava tubes large enough, then that is definitely something that we can exploit. The big problem with that is, of course, is that Olympus Mons is a substantial distance away, not a massive difference, but a substantial distance away from the proposed landing sites. So in any event, that is one drawback, and for very good reason. Because of the elevation of Olympus Mons, we have a very high level of radiation compared to the rest of the planet. So yeah, lava tubes definitely a good thing, but at the same time we need to make sure that we identify ones that we're going to be able to use without a doubt before we transition our population into something along those lines. Another space nut is looking at the underground issues. He's finding a link for that particular paper. I have a couple others as well. But yes, I would agree with you, Net Shaman. We're probably a long ways away from having the tech to allow mind transfer, but it's a great thing to imagine. I'm a futurist by nature as much as I am somebody who likes to talk about present tech. So yeah, cables, pulleys, you can set them up to move objects over longer distances, says Tom, and yes, I do agree with that. I mean, we were doing that all the way back at the time of Stonehenge, moving massive stones weighing tons and tons with simple pulleys. So yeah, you can definitely do that. All right. So yes, I do agree with you, Net Shaman. We are a long ways away from that, and not enough memory available being one of those things. It has been calculated that it would require, even with today's computer technology, a computer the size of a warehouse and a nuclear reactor in order to copy the human thought processes. So we probably have a ways to go as far as that's concerned. 3D printing of habitats feasible on Mars given seismic activity, and 3D printed hab examples have not been reinforced with tensile materials. I do believe that 3D printing is possible. I do believe that there are problems, of course. The Mars quakes so far, anyway, have been very, very minor. But nevertheless, I do think that 3D printing of surface Mars habitats is something that really needs to be looked into. But yeah, there are, of course, drawbacks with it. And like anything, when we're talking about Martian colonization, there's work that has to be done. How do you deal with the dust from going in and out? There are two methods. The first method being, of course, the environmental suits being on the outside of the structure and transitioning from the outside to the inside without actually going through an airlock. And then as far as the airlocks are concerned, there was a very detailed method of using a combination of water sprays and essentially hosing you down in the airlock to remove the dust. And once again, this is an article that is chock full of information. I'm deeply appreciative to this subscriber for providing it to me. So in any event, all right, what do we have now? Could lava tubes be sealed with compressive bulkheads like the Hoover Dam? Sure, absolutely. And once again, it adds to the possibility of, terraforming lava tubes. They're much, much smaller than a valley and much less vulnerable to a meteoroid strike. Water ice used for structural material? Absolutely, FTL. Thanks for asking all these questions. Yes, as a matter of fact, water ice has already been proposed and demonstrated. It won a NASA contest for a surface structure. It's called the Martian Ice House. And 5 centimeters worth of ice provides almost complete protection from surface radiation on Mars. So yes, as long as you're in an area of Mars where water ice does not tend to melt. Although, there went the link. That's a big link. Okay, so in any event. But yeah, I encourage you to Google Mars Ice House, and you will find the information on that. All right, more questions. Let's have a look. Wow, it's been half an hour already. Let's have a look. Unfortunately, the online chat doesn't always pop up for me, so I don't always have a clear view of that. I apologize for you folks who've been trying to ask questions there. Once again, this is one of the reasons why. There went the link for Mars Ice House here on the questions and answers portion of the Discord server. However, for those of you who are not Patreon members, I will be more than happy to provide a link for that on this particular video. And if you folks sublimation be a bigger problem than direct melting, yes, sublimate this. You would definitely need something to repair this on a regular basis. There's no question about that. Sublimation would take a considerable amount of time before it became a significant issue. But yes, you would definitely need to patch it on a regular basis in order to make sure that the structure remained intact. Whoa! That's what I get for trying to get comfortable. Okay. In any event, it's quite all right in outer space now. It doesn't bother me. Doesn't bother me. All right, we have more stuff coming. A big difference between nuclear power and nuclear power. There seems to be a discussion going on right now about nuclear power on the live chat, so that's a cool thing, definitely. Yes, I already, as somebody just brought up a microphone issue, I actually have a boom mic and a full-fledged microphone on its way. I was going to announce all these things at the beginning, and then all this craziness occurred. But no, a microphone, a boom to attach it, I've got a lot of improvements on their way. And that's because of you guys, just so you know. these Patreon subscribers who have been so generously helping me out. They've made all the difference in the world in terms of my ability to not only make this my career, but also to upgrade what I'm doing. So in any event, I'm not going to talk a lot more about that, but I just say thank you. All right, a phased array powerful enough and with the right frequencies to pass through dust, but with a shorter wavelength than a human body that you could target ground stations without moving parts and do beamed power. That's a very interesting idea. Is there thorium on Mars? Yeah, well, okay, as far as that's concerned, the phase array, that's something I'm going to have to look up. I must confess, I cannot express an opinion on that. But as far as, the dust is concerned, but beamed power is something that could definitely be done on Mars. Easier actually than on Earth because of the thinness of the atmosphere. Of course, there's less solar radiation reaching Mars because of its distance from the sun, but nevertheless, beaming power through less than 1% of the density of the atmosphere is unquestionably going to make a difference. So stay angry about microphones. Hell yes, I am. Right now I'm waiting on the stinking postal system and Amazon to rectify my problem. But this was taken care of by one of you folks, a generous donation last week as a result of our streaming event. So thank you. We are almost at the end of the tunnel, guys. I promise you, this silly way of handling audio will be over soon, I promise. Okay. What importance do you think, I've got Juheed, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, what importance do you think Boston Dynamics might have in building a Mars colony, considering their projects like Atlas, a humanoid robot? I think that they could have an immense contribution. These are expensive robots that we're talking about here. I mean, the one that SpaceX has on site at the moment, Zeus, costs probably in excess of $100,000. But yes, anything automated that SpaceX can use to assemble habitation structures and other structures that we're going to need before human beings have to be committed to this, absolutely. Boston Dynamics could contribute a great deal in my intention. Here's an idea. Imagine how much dust dispersion, says another space nut, could be done from a launch site with a deluge system. Quite a bit. No doubt. So yes, water is the key to everything. And for the longest time, we thought we had almost no water on Mars, until very recently, actually. And now we're pretty convinced that there is water just about everywhere beneath the surface at differing levels. So that's going to be a big, big difference. Yes, $75,000 for the basic robot. When you add on the additional packages from Boston Dynamics, it comes to over $100K, but still, yeah, you can get it for as little as $75K. Yes, that's my next Christmas present, keep in mind. Just kidding, that's the last thing I need. Okay. All right, given the smaller well, could some space tether in midterm be realistic for Mars? Now, are we talking a space tether from Mars to Earth, or are we talking about a space tether for a space elevator? If you could clarify that question for me. Orbit, yes, absolutely. We have, within our current technology, the capability of building a space elevator on Mars. Because of the thin atmosphere and because of the lower gravity and because there isn't tons of space junk to rip the tether apart, there is one danger for a Martian space elevator, and that is the moon of Phobos. Any geosynchronous space elevator, which is what you would probably need, the tether would be in danger from Phobos every few weeks. So you would need an ion engine to push the platform for the space elevator out of the way before Phobos collides with it. And by the way, I have a video that's entitled, I believe, Can We Get to Mars Without SLS or the Starship? I believe that's the title of the video. In it, I describe a Mars space elevator and actually a video reproduced with the permission of the creator of it to show you what Phobos would look like from the perspective of the tether if you moved it just out of the way. It is a really, really cool animation, and I strongly recommend that you check it out. So once again, it's called Can We Get to Mars Without the SLS or the Starship, but includes a lot about it. Okay. So yes, both Mars and the Moon. Yes, I agree. There should be both a lunar space elevator and a Martian space elevator. One from Earth is beyond our current technology, at least according to most people. But Mars and the Moon, it makes all the sense in the world. You don't have to worry about, your ships coming through the atmosphere to land, some sort of problems with that and then burning up on entry. You don't have to worry about those dangers. There's just tons and tons of advantages of having a space elevator. Not only that, coincidentally, if you use the space elevator as sort of a trebuchet or a catapult, using the rotation of Mars to your advantage, you can conceivably use a station in orbit to launch a ship to escape velocity from Mars. So you, without any fuel, you can escape Mars's gravitational well just by using a space elevator in geosynchronous orbit. Another space nut just provided an orbit, a diagram of the Phobos orbit, and yes, it is a crazy, crazy moon, and it orbits a ridiculously close distance to the planet. So yes, any satellites that we put up there has to keep Phobos in mind. It is an extreme danger, but at the same time, there are certainly ways of getting around the problem. All right. Sling ramp, rail, FTL, as far as that's concerned, I do believe that Moon and the question is, any thoughts of a sling ramp rail cannon to put stuff into Mars or into orbit from Mars? This can be done with our current technology using an electromagnetic lunar mass driver with 1/6 of the Earth's gravity. With 1/3, it might be a little bit more challenging, might require a lot more power. But in any event, yes, as long as you get enough elevation and as long as you have enough power behind it, it's possible. Although I would still say that a Martian space elevator is more practical. And could you use Phobos as part of the elevator? I just happened to see that on the live stream. Thank you for that question. Using Phobos as the elevator itself has been proposed. One of the drawbacks, of course, is that if you use it as the elevator, then any ship that needs to rendezvous with it also needs to come into a very low orbit where Phobos is located in order to pick up or deliver cargo. But yes, it is possible. However, you cannot put a space elevator connected to Phobos into geosynchronous orbit because Phobos orbits Mars much, much more rapidly than the planet itself rotates. Could it be pushed into a more specific orbit with rockets or old starships, asks Tom. Yeah, that could definitely be done. Obviously, it would take a tremendous amount of effort because this is not a small asteroid that we're talking about here. And yes, it probably is a captured asteroid from the asteroid belt, Phobos is. But yes, that would be another possibility, is to push it into a higher orbit. Other suggestions have been made to crash Phobos into Mars and to eliminate the problem altogether or to destroy it somehow. Honestly, I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not a huge fan of raining tons of debris onto the surface of Mars or blowing up a moon that's been there forever. Now, in millions of years, it's going to crash into the planet by itself anyway, unless we do something about it, which we probably will be able to. But nevertheless, yeah, I would say that it would take a tremendous amount of power, and that's where nuclear engines could come into the equation, by the way, to gradually push Phobos into a higher orbit, into a geostationary orbit. That's a heck of an idea. Could Phobos Challenges be in an episode all by itself? Yes, I would say probably so. Because, yeah, and once again, FTL, the energy that it would take to get Phobos into a different orbit is pretty tremendous, because it is a massive, massive rock. It's huge. So in any event, it's something for a long term rather than a short term. Another space nut just suggested that we start mining Phobos and make it into an X-moon. Well, that's a possibility depending on exactly what sort of materials are there. We have some plans, or NASA does in any event, to explore Phobos in greater detail. But yeah, mining Phobos has been proposed. And yes, I agree with you, Scarin. Better use it than destroy it. Yes. Mass drivers to shoot out the ice. Interesting idea. Why not just move the wormhole alien just said, why not just move the tether? You may have joined a bit late, but yes, that can be done. All you have to do is use the platform that's in orbit, in ion engines with a slight adjustment every time Phobos comes by, and you can avoid it. It does require that you make that maneuver every couple of weeks, but yes, that's the simplest solution. It's just move the tether out of the way every time there's a potential collision, and it's really not much of an issue at all. So yes, once again, I'm a big advocate of a Martian space elevator. I think that it's a heck of an idea, and it can be done with today's technology. All right, what else do we have? Let's see, we have a brief, we still have a lot of people watching. This is amazing. Thank you, folks. Thank you so much for tuning into this. I am humbled, really. Boy, humbled instead of angry. What are your thoughts about building large orbital space stations in Mars to sell and move to Earth, given its proximity to mining in the belt? I would say, given its, well, first of all, large orbital space stations, they would be easier in a lot of ways to construct them in Mars orbit, because you're not having to, escape Earth's gravity well in order to construct them. Large orbital space stations potentially can produce artificial gravity, although there is a raging debate about that too, as to whether or not centripetal force actually does produce legitimate gravity. But nevertheless, we're getting a little bit off topic though. But in any event, let's, if we can, try to steer it back to challenges. But yes, proximity to the asteroid belt. Wow, that's cool. Mining Phobos and Deimos. Thank you very much for that link. Let's see if we can, I'm going to have a look at a lot of this stuff and then post a lot of these links in the description once all of this is done. We have 3 people typing right now. Very good indeed. And 122 people watching. I am honored. Thank you so much. All right, and another link. Yes, a lot of links on this particular stream, which I will be posting after all of this is done at some point today. Also, by the way, there's going to be another video that I'll be releasing soon as well. All right. And thank you, another space nut. Okay, FTL. Once again, FTL being an incredibly active participant here to all of these questions. Once again, the topic being challenges to Mars colonization. Mine the asteroids that follow Earth in the same orbit. They are really close. Yes, that is indeed a possibility. A little off topic, but I'm going to say this real quick. It has been pointed out that it is actually easier for Martians to exploit asteroids in the asteroid belt, not necessarily near Mars asteroids, NMO, But in any event, near Earth, near Mars asteroids, or rather asteroids in the asteroid belt, it's easier to exploit those in terms of fuel used than it is for Earth to exploit the moon, believe it or not, because of the low amount of gravity and the small gravity well that Mars has. It's actually easier to exploit the asteroid belt from Mars than it is for us to exploit the moon from Earth. So that's a pretty amazing thing, no question. Now that doesn't mean it's quicker. We can get to the moon a lot faster, but it does require more fuel for us to exploit the moon than it does for Martians to exploit the asteroid belt. What are the near-term 15-year marketable services and products for Mars that will make it economically feasible? Oh my Lord, there's tons of those. Dr. Zubrin put out a well-known article on this particular subject. The biggest exports from Mars, I would say, would be one of the biggest things. But let's see here. So we have another space nut making a suggestion, and we won't know until we get there. I agree with you, Tom. That's a very good point. I would definitely say that exploiting the asteroid belt is going to be one of the big things potentially that future Martians can do. There's a lot of asteroids that have a lot of valuable raw materials in them. Tourism probably won't float it. I agree. You have to make a big commitment as far as tourism is concerned. 6 months there, 2 years on the planet's surface, 6 months back, unless we come up with a practical form of nuclear propulsion, as I mentioned in my most recent video. I would say that trying to exploit tourism is going to be a really, really difficult thing to do. Fiber optics can be made out of clearer materials, faster speeds, and lower gravity. Imagine the clarity of fiber made on Mars. Thank you, another space nut. Very, very interesting point. Manufacturing better quality fiber optics, plus they're pretty doggone light, right? So you could transport an enormous amount of that back to Earth. And of course, Earth would pay a lot of money for it. So yeah, I think that would be a hell of a thing to exploit. Okay, medical production. Large products from Earth orbit seem to be low-hanging fruit. Yeah, I mean, that's another possibility in lower gravity, although microgravity seems to be a better environment for that sort of thing, for more unique types of medical production. But once again, as Tom brought out, we won't know for sure. Laser repeater towers that stretch above the dust storms. Yes, says Finger Blaster Studios, who, by the way, is also producing my my Crew Dragon that you're going to be seeing on set, hopefully here soon. I'm going to be linking him soon, but he's printing that for me. So keep him in mind, along with Spaceship Mania, who does the designs for these things. And of course, some of you may have noticed these things. But yes, laser repeater towers, anything involving a thinner atmosphere, there's going to be applications that you can use from Mars that you can't use from Earth. Less mass to send back. With less gravity, you're going to be able to send back a lot more materials than you can send from Earth. And that's why, of course, that you can launch the Starship without the Super Heavy from Mars, as Elon Musk has pointed out, and return it to Earth. And you don't need the Super Heavy in order to be able to do that because of the massive differences in gravity. We talk about 1/3 gravity as if it's this huge problem. And don't get me wrong, I think it probably will be. But 1/3 gravity represents a lot of huge advantages as well. So, in any event, bear with me here. Go ahead, another space nut. And yes, any products that we send back, you don't necessarily need to take advantage of the alignment of the planets. Depending on how quickly you need them to arrive. That all depends as well. But, you could use the Super Heavy to escape Mars's gravity and then extend your launch window. So, there's a lot of advantages that 1/3 gravity represents to a future Mars colony. Okay, we have 2 more people typing. The moon would be easier for production. Easier in some ways, yes, I would agree. When it comes down to it, there are 2 major factors that involve, our justification for going to Mars. And it doesn't have anything to do with economics, guys. I mean, we can talk about this in terms of making Mars self-sustaining as far as its economy is concerned. But there are 2 major reasons. First, exploration. Secondly, the long-term survival of the species. Those are the 2 major reasons to go to Mars. Economic reasons, they exist. But the fact of the matter is that people going to Mars are going there for those 2 major reasons. They're idealistic reasons. And that's why I think that the types of people who decide to go to Mars are going to be a different breed than the rest of us. Just my opinion, but nevertheless. But yes, I agree with you, Finger Blaster. We're going to need mass production on Mars anyway. So you may as well take advantage of it. Yes, I agree. Another space nut. I'm going to Mars to change the world. And yes, I totally agree with that. Our civilization here on this planet, our days are numbered. Eventually, something will happen. I think it more likely that we will destroy ourselves than any of the other cataclysms that might befall us. But nevertheless, having our civilization restricted to this one planet puts us in a very, very vulnerable position. And the only way to avoid that is to relocate elsewhere and someplace a little of a ways away. And I agree with you, Net Shaman. Mars will change humans forever. Now, any other questions? Any other topics about, and once again, we're talking about challenges to Mars colonization. Spinning habitats, bowl shape and range from Mars gravity in the center to 2 to 3 Gs at the rim. That's has been suggested, and yeah, once again, talking about artificial gravity here. Another consciousness, another relationship to the universe, says Net Shaman. I agree with you completely. Once those who decide to go to Mars and endure all of those hardships and all of those dangers are going to be a different breed. Plain and simple. Okay. So yes, another space nut's very, very determined to go to Mars. Do we have any other, let's see. Why doesn't NASA ever send a microscope to Mars? You know something? And that came from outside, and that's a really good question. And something that is actually related to potential problems to Mars colonization. Like it or not, I think that there is a possibility that any life, if it exists, and honestly, I think that it does, theoretically represents a threat. And so an electron microscope being sent to Mars makes all the sense in the world. However, it is a large, heavy piece of equipment. It's extremely fragile, and getting it to land on Mars without damaging it would be quite the challenge. As a matter of fact, the 2020 rover is going to have something pretty close to that. It's going to be able to examine the Martian surface at the micron level. It will be able to take a really close look at it, but not on the electron microscope level. But the 2020 rover is also going to have parachutes that provide a tremendous and abrupt deceleration that is going to potentially cause damage to very fragile equipment on board. And this might have been one of the reasons as to why we haven't sent something along those lines yet. Okay, so asteroids would be easier to get to from Mars. That is true. And yeah, I did bring that up, wormhole alien. People can work their way up to different levels of gravity stress. That's an interesting idea. You create different levels of artificial gravity so people work their way up or down to adjusting to the different levels of gravity. I think the single baffle design of Starship is a good idea for the Mars trip. It seems there are no basic fail-safes with this model. That's from FTL. That's sort of a, yeah, I'd say that can be described as a challenge. Yeah, I mean, it does concern me that there are, no abort systems built into this. There's no room for any error whatsoever in the landing procedure, and there is a way around it. There is a modular way around this, but I'm not going to discuss that right now. And it's not my idea, by the way, either, but it's been circulating around the community a little bit. And also it's been discussed a bit, or at least in terms of the Starship design, seems to suggest that Elon Musk may be moving towards a modular method of using the Starship. That being the case, I'm going to do a video on this particular subject very soon, so stay tuned. What effect will a vegan diet create to colonists? This is from another space nut. A vegan diet can definitely function. I know people that are on vegan diets. However, you don't have to have one. My proposal for aquaponics, which I brought up, there's a video of mine that has a pyramid on it that talks about aquaponics, also involves fish being transported, tilapia eggs being transported to Mars, and at a certain temperature they won't hatch until they arrive, and they would survive a 6-month transition. Once they arrive at Mars, they will hatch, and then you can use the tilapia in the aquaponics process in order to grow produce, some pretty incredible produce. I've actually seen the system in operation when I used to work or volunteer for a charity that used aquaponics. And you get fish out of the deal. So at the very least, you can, have protein and fish in your diet. And there's no real reason why we can't do that with today's technology. So a vegan diet need not be embraced, but at the same time, it can happen. And it certainly is manageable. There are many ways around, there are many ways to survive and survive well with a meatless diet. I have many friends who do it. But doesn't have to go that way. There are ways that we can definitely transport a non-vegan way of living to the red planet without a great deal of effort. Oh, Net Shaman just asked, when will the new biosuit be available for us, future Martians? Yes, well, that all depends on how aggressively NASA supports the concept. We were talking about the biosuit. I have that linked in one of my videos, although, frankly, I'm forgetting which one, if somebody wants to pop that on there. This is a skin-tight bodysuit that serves also as a spacesuit. It can deal with the pressure differentials. It's a lot easier to repair. It's something that's been created by an engineer at MIT, and NASA has partially supported the concept. And if NASA could get behind the biosuit, then I think that I think it's nothing but a good thing. It provides a hell of a lot easier way to maneuver around the surface of the planet. It's much more straightforward to repair in the case of tears. A biosuit could make a world of difference to surface operations. So, in any event, FTL, do you think a one-way SkyTrain, starships all stay on Mars and become the infrastructure, a two-way SkyTrain is more sensible in the near term? In the near term, I don't think so. And the reason for that is because Mars and Earth are they're just not at the same distance from each other. As a matter of fact, the distance between the two planets is colossal depending on their positioning. A SkyTrain from near Earth orbit to the moon, yeah, that's doable. That's like the mother of all lunar space elevators. But from here to Mars, boy, that's a tough one. Not with today's technology. That's just my opinion, of course. Okay. Cannibalize the starship for infrastructure, something that goes awry, at least there's something more than capable of returning to Earth, or leave a starship in orbit and have a small orbiter disassembled in the cargo bay. Yeah, a return vehicle is probably a good idea in case something does go wrong. Because, yeah, if we're going to be disassembling our starships to try to survive, then a way back is definitely something to do. So in any event, a way to return is important. And once again, this is where nuclear engines come into play here. Nuclear power allows us to be able to transport a crew to Mars within 30 days if we use the right type of technology and if we're able to perfect it, of course, and return within that 30 days, or with nuclear thermal propulsion, arrive to Mars within 100 days and return in 100 days, which theoretically could fit within that 6-month window. So yes, nuclear engines could make a huge difference in terms of emergency returns. Excuse me, dry mouth again. But once again, nuclear power on Mars, although it makes a tremendous amount of impact to our long-term survival, is the Atomic Energy Commission going to give Elon Musk all the nuclear power he wants? I seriously have my doubts. I think that this is going to have to be a collaborative effort with NASA at the very least in order to have nuclear power on Mars, at least in the short term. A few starships set in orbit for a space station, Net Shaman. Yes, I tend to agree. Especially a modular starship created specifically for that reason. That would certainly be a possibility. Once again, starships are designed for transport more than they're designed to be space stations. But one that's modular and designed to be used for that purpose, yeah, that's entirely possible. Net Shaman said, I hope Vasimir will be operational in 2 years. Yeah, that would be really nice. There's a lot of arguments saying that it's going to take nuclear fusion in order to deal with the power requirements for Vasimir. They're working very hard on it. Maybe nuclear fission can pull it off, but there's a lot of arguments saying that we're going to have to crack fusion. And for those of you who don't know, Vasimir uses high energy radio waves to ionize a neutral type of fuel such as xenon, and then once it's ionized, to use electromagnets to power it out the back at over 100,000 miles an hour. And with that kind of propellant traveling at that kind of speed, you can create an extremely efficient rocket that delivers very, very intense amounts of speed. And once again, we're talking about Earth to Mars in 39 days if we can perfect that. So yeah, that's a really, really big difference. Okay, so we got more people typing. Let's have a look here. All right. Let's see, fuel storage, and once again, if we use a starship for fuel storage, then we're going to need to make it into a propellant depot, which will involve, of course, a lot of insulation, a sun shield, and probably active refrigeration in order to be able to prevent any propellant boil off. By using a combination of all of those things under test in vacuum, it was determined that hydrogen fuel, which boils off worse than anything, could be reduced to a 0% boil off in vacuum. So it is possible, but you need active refrigeration and insulation and a sun shield in order to be able to accomplish that. Okay, no, I have not, FTL, I have not watched that, so I apologize for that. But yes, robot designs to mine the asteroids. As you can tell, asteroid mining is something I very much believe in, something that I think that the future Martians should take advantage of. And for those of you who've seen my video on 16 Psyche, the amount of valuable minerals in that asteroid are, at least as near as we can tell from our spectrographic analysis, is beyond comprehension. And it is far easier to exploit that asteroid from Mars than it is from Earth, obviously. Okay, we got 2 more people typing. Once again, sorry. Yeah, I'll look up RoboGames FDL, definitely. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so I'm just looking. Complications of Martian sand being statically charged cancers. GameStrom, we have talked about that briefly. However, I do want to reemphasize the whole statically charged aspect of Martian dust. Martian dust is dangerous on a lot of levels. Not only is it poisonous, but also in a dust storm, it's electrostatically charged. It will adhere to surfaces that aren't even really magnetic. They could potentially adhere to spacesuit visors. Dust storms can be extremely hazardous. They not only blot out the sun as far as solar panels are concerned, but they also could be extremely dangerous to anybody caught in the open. And of course, if they adhere to your spacesuit, then you need to make damn sure that they get removed if you go through an airlock, or preferably have a system where you transition from the spacesuit directly into your vehicle, into your rover, or into your habitat without having to go through an airlock at all. But yes, Martian dust does represent a danger, but at the same time, it can also be extremely useful, as I mentioned before. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that because I have to admit I'm so intrigued about everything that was in this article. I'm probably going to make a video about that as well, about the hazardous nature of Martian dust, but how we could turn that around and use it to our advantage. Can we design a device to exploit the static properties of dust storms? Maybe, but so far we haven't designed anything that can take advantage of lightning. So, it's hard to say. It would be worth looking into. There's no question about that. But that is, the electrostatic nature of dust storms is similar to lightning strikes in many ways. And that can be extremely hazardous to any technological equipment that we have going through it. A giant lightning rod, interesting idea. Why not? I think it'd be worth looking up. As a matter of fact, I think I will look that up. Boy, I have a lot of things to investigate at this point, which is why I love doing these things. So, once again, all right, so right now we've gone a bit quiet. We have 126 people watching, though. Anybody is welcome. We have 18 minutes left, by the way. We've been going for an hour and 12 minutes. How the time flies. So, in any event, what will it take for SLS to be canceled, they ask. Well, that's not technically a threat to Martian colonization, but hell yeah, it is. The SLS is the most overpriced and wasteful piece of equipment that NASA has ever worked on, in my opinion. And at least it's going to be a hazard to NASA attempting to go to Mars someday. So yeah, politics, politics, politics. I hope that SLS gets canceled, but the only way it will is if there is actually an alternative that is demonstrated to be viable, which means we need to get the Starship off the ground. We need to prove that it will be a viable method of transportation. So far, we're getting close, but so far it hasn't even, it's gone through static fires, and that's as far as it's gotten. Not that we should expect anything more from it, but that's the key thing, obviously. We get the Starship working, we have no need for SLS. Plain and simple. 127 people watching. Do you think it'll be hard to find people to go to the moon and Mars? No, I don't. I really don't. There have been a number of polls created in terms of people who are more than willing to go to the moon and to go to Mars. and it's far in excess of the number of people that we need to go to those places. Far more than 1 million, by the way. So yeah, I would say that getting 1 million people to go to Mars is something that's definitely a possibility. Myself included, by the way. Once I'm assured that my children are fully established and taking care of themselves, yeah, definitely. Okay, we have more people typing. And by the way, we have about 15 minutes left, guys. And thank you so much for your contributions. Thank you so much. We're going to make Martian moonshine together. Well, that's a way to get through the hazards of Martian colonization, isn't it? Just drink our way through it. Health and age standards will need to be reduced to get some of those million people to Mars. Yes, I agree. And after all, John Glenn went into orbit in his 70s and did just fine. So there's no reason whatsoever as to why, we shouldn't change the regulations for astronauts to go to Mars. Now, does that mean that these people should be allowed to do everything that astronauts do? Well, maybe not. But still, as far as making some sort of contribution to a Martian colony, hell yeah, absolutely. We can change those requirements. I think that it's going to be necessary. All right, more questions. No, it's not. Caperton. Who's going to foot the bill for Mars until it's economically feasible? Well, I would say that's under the most, and Tom, thanks for asking that question. I would say the best answer to that question is going to be Starlink. Although I have put out videos suggesting other ways that the Starship can create a great deal of revenue for SpaceX, but nevertheless, it is going to be Starlink and SpaceX that's going to make it possible. And by the way, allow me to get extremely pissed off right now, because for the amount of money that our nation spends on defense, and for all of you who are part of the military, this is no offense to you whatsoever. I honor what you do. Thank you. But we spend billions of dollars unnecessarily on weapon systems that we're never going to use. We could have created 4 colonies on Mars right now, 4 of them, for the amount that 1 year of defense spending costs for the United States. So when it comes right down to it, the U.S. government could foot the bill. They just won't. So as a result, it's going to be left to SpaceX and Starlink and other unique forms of funding in order to do this. Okay, I'm calm now. Question from Juhid. Do you think NASA will still try to push SLS along being used to go to Mars? Juhid, yeah, as far as your question is concerned, NASA will have to be convinced, in my opinion, that the Starship is relatively safe unless we can find a way to put an abort system into it. I think that they're going to need at least 10 to 20 demonstrations of it being used in manned flight before we allow for that. So in any event, yeah, and once again, there's the politics involved with it as well. The SLS provides a ridiculous number of jobs, but I mean, is that the reason we're going to the moon? Is that the reason we're going to Mars, is to create jobs? Hell no. We're going there for other reasons. At least I'd like to think so. So hopefully the SLS will become a dinosaur as soon as we demonstrate that there is a workable alternative. And because $20 billion on a rocket that is yet to fly and we still don't even have a prototype, give me a break. So I'm getting angry again. I'm starting to live up to my reputation. SpaceX and others only able to do it because they're sheltered from tyrants via that expensive defense budget. Yeah, that's true. And I would agree with that. And once again, I did not mean to say that I'm against a defense budget. I'm not meaning to say that I'm against people spending it. But there are lots of things that we use for producing. And by the way, there's lots of other waste in our budgetary system besides defense. Don't get me wrong. I used it as one example. I'm not looking to offend anybody who currently works in the military. However, we do spend triple what the Chinese spend. We spend far more than what the Russians and the Russians and the Chinese spend combined. Is it really necessary that we have all of these high-tech weapon systems? I think that we could reduce it by 10% and still be fully secure. I solidly feel that we could do that. But just my opinion. So, in any event. My question contained the idea that BFR would actually be safe in going to Mars. And yes, we're using the term BFR. Thank you very much. I just love that term because I'm never going to stop using it. Yeah, I would say that it's going to take a number of flights on the part of BFR, as we like to keep calling it, before NASA is going to be 100% convinced that they should go with it, because they had more than 10 successful flights of the space shuttle before Challenger, and ever since the space shuttle, they have proven very, very hesitant to use something that doesn't have an abort system. So, can we do a Starship without an abort system, or with an abort system? Yeah, actually, we can, but I'm going to talk about that later, so in a future video. All right, people who want to go there and raise future Martian kids. Yes, that's true. People who raise kids on Mars, they're going to have to live with the certainty, the almost complete certainty, at least with our current technology, that those kids will never be able to visit Earth. But on the other hand, those kids could possibly look forward to visiting Jupiter. They can look forward to visiting other moons in the solar system without having to worry about the massive adjustment between 1G and 0.2 Gs as opposed to 0.3 Gs and 0.2 Gs. Not nearly as much of a difference. But yeah, that is a serious consideration. These people would have to live with the strong possibility that their children could not realistically go to Earth, at least not with our current technology, without experiencing, horrific health problems because of the massive gravity difference. Okay. And yes, rockets are flying bombs. I agree with it. That for sure. Okay, we have more comments coming in. And 9 minutes left. I may go a couple of more minutes, but nevertheless. Man, by the way, guys, thanks for all of you tuning in spite of all of my embarrassing screw-ups. Really appreciate that. I'll just do my best to make sure that doesn't happen again. Do I think that The Expanse does a good job of displaying life in the solar system? FTL asks. Yes, absolutely. Of all the science fiction shows and movies out there, it does unquestionably the best demonstration of what the solar system and the future of the human species is going to be. Martians are going to identify themselves as Martians, not as Terrans, not as humans. I think people who grow up on Callisto will regard themselves as Jovians or something along those lines. We'll still be humans, but very different kinds of humans. And yeah, I'd say that it's the best one out there, the best book, the best TV show, and to my knowledge anyway, of talking about what the future of the human species holds if we go out into the solar system. No doubt. Another space nut says he will identify as an ex-inhabitant of Earth. Yes, I may indeed do the same thing. I think that, by the way, there is a short story called The Martian Way. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. It's very, very old. Yes, the drives are not possible without huge radiators. That's true. Any nuclear drives, at least the really powerful ones, do require huge radiators in order to expel the waste heat out into space. But it's still within the realm of possibility with our current technology. Okay, let's keep it going. Keep it going. 134 people watching. Unbelievable. This audience. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. Okay. Any thoughts on short and midterm handling of human waste? Well, the most obvious one is fertilizing Martian soil. Clear out the perchlorates. Of course, we're also going to have to decontaminate the human. If we're talking about actual human waste here, and why not? Then yeah, that's something that could be used for fertilizer as they do in the Martian. No reason why that can't be done as long as it's decontaminated first. Not talking about politicians. I think we all have our own opinions about how to handle that kind of human waste, right? All right, can't wait for the day when the deepest Martian ocean's bottom has plastic in it. Yeah, well, let's hope that we don't have to produce that kind of waste. There are many ways that we have learned to produce recyclable materials on Mars. There's no reason why we should be making the same mistakes. We could put a big screen in the back. Actually, I'm going to have some stuff in the back. Don't you worry. I've got some surprises on the way. But I hate Amazon and I hate the postal system, but nevertheless, it's coming. It's coming! And you'll have some stuff in the background. Don't you worry. And you're going to like it. You're going to like it. Hellas Planitia as a colony or base area. I have, yes. And yeah, that's definitely a good region. I tend to prefer areas that are closer to major landmarks. That's just a personal thing. But in any event, like, of course, the Valles Marineris and Olympus Mons, those sorts of things. The proposed landing sites that Elon Musk has put forward is close to the volcanoes. So in any event, but yes, you're right, FTL, it is the lowest plane, and being low does make a big difference. Not sure about the ice presence, but I'm fairly certain one of the reasons why SpaceX has chosen their particular landing sites is because of the subglaciation that's taking place in the area, at least we're pretty certain are taking place in these regions. There need to be more training places to train people for Moon and Mars. Yes, as a matter of fact, there are private companies that are currently starting to do that are beginning the process of training astronauts outside of the official method of doing so. And we'll go ahead and put up a link on that one as well, rather than talk a lot about that. ATMA breaking address microbe contamination problem. Well, microbe contamination, clean rooms are going to be our best way of doing it, but microbe contamination is always going to be a danger. It's going to be difficult to completely eliminate it. And actually, microbes may be the only way for us to manage this. But let me put this forward to you real quick in the time that we have left. This paper that I read about eliminating perchlorates from the Martian soil, it talks about using enzymes similar to that used by over 50 different types of bacteria that naturally transition, or rather consume perchlorates, and produces oxygen as a byproduct. And by interesting coincidence, guess what we found in the Martian atmosphere in quantities larger than we anticipated? Oxygen. Is there something already there converting the perchlorates into oxygen? Do we just need to breed whatever might be there already doing this job for us in greater quantities and allow it to start doing these things for us? Who knows? I'd like to believe, as a matter of fact, I'm personally convinced that there is microbial life on Mars. But in any event, that we shall see hopefully very soon as to whether or not that's the case. But I just find that to be a very, very interesting coincidence. Okay, a couple of minutes left. How can we increase the signal to Mars? Putting antennas on the moon would be one thing, but yes, there are only a few ways to communicate with Mars, and that's through a number of antennas through the NASA system and through NASA mission control. And yes, indeed, there should be other ways of making that communication, and something along on the opposite side of the moon where we don't have so much radio interference would be an ideal method. So yeah, that's a very good question. And I would say that that's definitely something that we should do. Okay, let me just make sure that we still have a minute or two left, and I want to, lab-grown meat. Yes, indeed. A lot of people have talked about that as well. Okay, relays and the Lagrange points to maintain contact. Yep, that's another possibility. Lagrange points, by the way, are parking lots, gravitational parking lots that are located from every massive body in space, whether it be the moon, whether it be Earth, whether it be Mars. So yeah, relay points and the Lagrange points where they're not going to be moving around would be a really good idea. Okay, so we are officially at the end, but I'm going to allow for one more question. One more. We have a number of comments going on as far as real meat production, that sort of thing. Yes, nothing moves on the Lagrange point. Very true. Thank you for that background suggestion. That's an interesting idea. But then I just wasted my doggone prints. Now, you're going to love these prints. You're going to love these prints. They are so cool. Okay, ZZ Top is typing. Is this our last question? All right, here's the last one. It actually came from the outside from Spartan J. Starship bases on Mars. Well, it depends on what you're talking about as far as that's concerned. Starship bases, I think that it's, if we're talking about landing pads, that's something I actually intend to discuss something very soon. But yeah, in terms of making it easier to land on Mars, in terms of making it safer to land on Mars, it's going to be absolutely vital that we have bases specifically set up for us to be able to, landing pads, exactly. I'd say that that's going to be vital because, as just about everybody watching this should know, thus far, SpaceX has only landed on perfectly flat surfaces. Now, of course, the landings on the ships have been, obviously they've moved, but they're still flat. And we've had some failures as a result of the fact of the movement of these particular landing platforms. So yeah, landing pads is definitely something that needs to be done. And I definitely encourage it. And there are ways to do that, and I intend to put that in an upcoming video. Okay, folks, there are more comments coming in. I wish I could have gotten to all of you. And by the way, everybody play nice. We've had a couple of disagreements, and that's to be expected in these sorts of discussions. Everybody agree to disagree, okay? And thank you so much. And by the way, all of this was made possible because of Patreon support. Because of my own screw-ups, we were allowed to have some contribution from the outside. I'm thrilled about that. I'm sorry I didn't get to too many of you folks. But at the same time, the questions are supposed to be coming in on Discord. That's where most of my attention is focused. But in some ways, I'm kind of glad we did have those problems because it allowed some questions to come in from the outside. So thank you so much, everybody who was part of the audience. all of you Patreon folks who made this possible and are working towards making this my career. By the way, we are 25% of our way there. I only put out the request for support a little over a week ago, and we're more than 25% of the way to my goal to making this my full-time career. Unreal. Unreal. Thank you so much, everybody. So, next Sunday, we will be doing this again. Sorry, I was just checking out the Discord one last time. So next Sunday, probably at the same time. Thank you so much, everybody, for being a part of this, for watching and participating. And as always, stay angry about space.